Last night's budget had both good news and bad news for Australians as they struggle with the rising cost of living and the rampant inflation that's causing it. The good news is that on the back of a strong recovery from the COVID period and a strong resources sector, the budget is, for now, in surplus. The bad news is that it's a fragile surplus. By that I mean it isn't a surplus that is the product of taking tough decisions to reform the causes of budget blowout. Indeed, in many ways, there have been new structural blowouts added, like increases to welfare payments and the indexation of grants. What that means is that the global commodity prices need only take a sneeze and the whole house of cards will come tumbling down. The experts aren't buying Treasurer Chalmers' claim that he can spend so much without making inflation worse. Indeed, Prime Minister Albanese continues to say that the advice is that the cash splash they've made in the budget will be deflationary.
So we could have done what some suggested, which is to hand cash out to provide that support. Instead, we designed a mechanism to reduce people's power bills that provides that support to families, whilst at the same time it therefore is deflationary as a measure.
Pressed on his views about the budget, the Australian Financial Review's John Kehoe ever so politely said, well, it certainly isn't deflationary. Simon Benson said, what might otherwise be called stimulus in other times has been rebranded by Treasury as inflation-busting policy. Now that's some classic Labor doublespeak if ever I've heard it. A bit like putting out a fire with petrol. Robert Gottliebson said after his 43rd budget lockup, in all those years, I can't recall a Treasurer forecasting that inflation would slump from 6% to 3.25% in 1 year, while wages grew by 4%, and real GDP growth would fall from 3.25% to 1.5%. It's such an outlandish forecast that there is a good chance it is wrong. But given the big spending of the government, I believe the balance of probability is that inflation will not fall as expected in the budget, and there's a risk that a shocked Reserve Bank will not cut rates and may even be forced to raise them. Well said. The blame will sit squarely on government spending. Now, while there was some support provided to those on the lowest incomes in the budget, Middle Australia got very little out of it. Very little other than the promise of more inflation, higher taxes, especially through bracket creep, wages that continue to be outstripped by inflation and the cost of living, and the looming threat of even more interest rate rises. There was no big picture vision to do the hard work that's needed to improve productivity and put the budget on a sustainable footing. And in that context, sadly, it will be a surplus squandered.